Roll the presses. There's a new tycoon game in town, and this one lets you take control of the news. In Newstower, you'll step into the shoes of the editor of a newspaper and manage what stories to cover, your staff, your print layout, and so much more. In this video, I'll be grinding this game down and giving it a full review, ranking it from decaf to fully caffeinated. I will preface this by saying that this is an early access review, and that has been taken into account. Without further ado, let's grind this game down and see how it brews. Newstower sees you step into the shoes of an editor, taking over your family's paper from your uncle. Now, the story of this game definitely sets the gameplay up well. Your uncle has left you with this newspaper, and it's up to you to build the newspaper up so it can be the best newspaper in the world. Newstower also integrates a lot of little side stories into the game. The Mafia is integrated, adding a bit of a side story and fleshing out the backstory a bit more with your uncle, and it really just adds another dimension to the story. I love how the story implements consequences for your choices, and often you'll have things like mobsters coming to visit your paper and rile you up a bit, or you'll have protesters, or things like lawsuits, which just add that extra bit of story into the game. And of course, being a story about making a newspaper, there's also a whole lot of story woven into the different stories you cover throughout the game. Overall, the story is integrated really well into the gameplay, driving different missions and adding lots of twists and turns. So for story and world building, I'm rating Newstower as fully caffeinated. Newstower is one of those games that keeps you on your toes with lots of different things to manage. This is definitely a tycoon management sim game with a lot of the familiar elements that we love and know in this style of game. You'll need to hire staff for each part of the newspaper process, including things like reporters, editors, typesetters, and so on. And each staff member has different skill levels and different needs to keep them happy. Your telegraphers will need to be the ones who find all of the stories for you before you can assign reporters to them. And the time taken to cover a story depends on the skill level of each of your staff members. Often the stories have multiple levels to complete and can have positive and negative aspects, so you can get consequences like fines, lawsuits, and so on, depending on what stories you're covering. After the reporters cover the story, they bring it back to be typeset and assembled and ready for print. You actually get to put together the layout for your paper yourself, and there's bonuses for having certain combos and certain placements on the newspaper, which is really cool. You do start off with just a one-page paper, and you can upgrade your printer and your equipment to be able to have extra pages in there, which is really cool. There are a lot of different side missions and optional things that you can do, including capturing different audiences with different preferences. So each audience has different stories that they like to see covered, and you'll need to make sure that you're ticking all the boxes for that audience if you really want to capture that audience. Unlocking different audiences allows you to unlock different locations, and at each of these different locations there are different things that you can buy with your influence points that help boost your production or boost different skills. You also will unlock the side characters or the different factions like the Mafia, the Mayor, and the High Society missions, which add another challenge. Now, some of the faction tasks do, in my opinion, feel a little bit unachievable at times because the required stories don't show up. So you'll often be required to post a certain amount of Mafia stories or Mayor stories, and they just don't show up in the actual stories that are presented for that week. So it can get a little bit frustrating trying to cover off these side tasks, and often there are consequences like mobsters being sent to your newspaper to wreck all your equipment, so it kind of can be a little bit frustrating in that regard. You do also have other staff that you need to hire for cleaning, maintenance, and later on you will need to hire people to edit, run ads, do lawsuits, security, all that kind of stuff. So it definitely adds a lot more dimension to the game, and it's not just the main newspaper staff that you'll need to hire. I didn't have any bugs playing this game, and it feels really good to play. It feels quite smooth. Some of the UI can be a little bit janky to navigate to figure out how to get back to the main screen from certain screens, but overall it's pretty good. Overall, Newstower has some really great mechanics that are engaging and fun. It can get a little bit frustrating when the right stories don't show up to complete some of the side missions, but overall this game has some really surprisingly complex management system. The functionality of printing a paper from start to finish is really cool. So for game mechanics, I'm rating Newstower as juiced. Newstower has a really cool graphic style that just looks really great. It's definitely got some nods to the time period it was set in, and you can see those clear aesthetics coming through from the 1930s, especially in the way the characters dress and things like the mafia and how they're designed. The music is really great, adding a fun atmosphere that suits the theme of the game, including that 1930s kind of feel, and the sound effects add another dimension to the game, providing some really important information. I do think some of the sound effects could be changed, particularly for when you need to go back to the stories when they have like a second level to make it more unique for that type of event. And I think they definitely could add in a few more for things like when your stories are finished, just so it's a bit more obvious as to where you're at in the process. Overall, the game looks great and the soundtrack is perfect for the game. The sound effects are great, but I would love to see some more differentiation for them between different events and maybe even some extras added in there. For graphics and sound, I'm rating newstower as juiced. Newstower is one of those games that does feel really unique. It's a side-scroller style which is really fun and innovative for a tycoon game, and I love seeing games push the envelope in familiar genres. The Mafia, Mayor, and High Society side quests add a lot of fun to the game, adding that extra challenge that you want to try and achieve. And the whole game functions as an editor sim, but in a tycoon way, which I haven't seen done before. Overall, the game has some similarities to other management sim/tycoon games, but the theme is unique and the game feels really original. So for originality, I'm rating newstower as fully caffeinated. Newstower is a great addition to the tycoon management sim space. The game is really fun and engaging to play, with a stack of management mechanics that really keep you on your toes and actually are surprisingly complex. The side missions add another dimension, and the graphic and sound design are pretty great. We've ground the beans, we've carefully weighed and pressed the grinds and brewed this game down. Now it's time for a taste test. Newstower is juiced. Newstower is available to purchase on Steam in early access. You can find the link below. The playtime currently sits at about 4 to 6 hours, and it definitely does feel like the first location in the game, so keep that in mind if you're thinking about purchasing it now. The roadmap has 2 major updates planned for 2024, with photography, weather reporting, stock exchange, and crosswords being added, as well as a whole bunch of other stuff. So it looks like they're going to be adding a whole lot more content this year. Thank you for tuning into this video. Until next time, stay caffeinated.